I'm Miguel, and I'm the Assistant Commissioner of Investigative Engineering Services, and I'm joined by my colleagues Jill and Antonio. And we're going to have a fun presentation for you today. We're presenting safety compliance filing requirements. Today, you're in for a treat. We're going to be talking about 6 different compliance filings. Yes, 6. So I'm going to begin the presentation. I'm going to talk about facades and sprinklers in high-rise buildings. Jill's going to take over and discuss retaining walls and parking structures, which is going to be new for us and new for everybody. And last but not least, Antonio is going to discuss elevators and boilers. So it's a little bit of a longer presentation than what you're used to. So bear with us, but we have a lot of great information. All these items have necessary compliance filings. And we'll run through why all of them have compliance filings and why they're critical to public safety. We perform outreach to architects, engineers, associations, and owners to gain compliance. And unfortunately, we still do not get all of these reports in on time. So that's the primary reason for us to be here today. And why we're outreaching to all of you today. We're hoping that you can take the information that you're going to gain here today, and you'll help us spread the word on these critical public safety items. So we need your help. So please listen in today and pass the word along. Course description, everything that I just spoke about, learning objectives, and as I said, I'm going to start talking about facades. So a lot of you have heard me speak in the past about facades. And for those of you that have been around for a little while in the audience, you know facades or FISP as Local Law 10, or Local Law 10 of 80 to be exact, or Local Law 11, or Local Law 11 of 98. In-house here, we just refer to it as FISP, Facade Inspection Safety Program. And the staff that we have in the FISP unit is really very specialized, and we have been trying very hard to retain professionals in the facade unit and hire inspectors that have background specifically in facades. And then we go through a whole very specialized training regimen within the unit to make sure that everybody has a very specific baseline when it comes to facades and understanding facades. So in cycle 9, we have about 16,000 buildings. For those of you that have heard me speak, that's up from 14,500 in cycle 8. So every cycle we add new buildings to the universe, and that's where the additional 1,500 buildings have come into the cycle in cycle 9. So NRFs, and that's why we're here. We'd like to get that NRF number down. We're at 1721, so still a very large number for cycle 8. And believe it or not, we still have 177 cycle 7 NRFs and 31 cycle 6 NRFs. So cycle 6, that's 15 plus years ago. And believe it or not, we've outreached to all cycle 7 and cycle 6 owners of these NRF properties. We've gotten in contact with them. We've let them know that these reports are way past due in an effort to try and get these reports in. So what's in the FISP universe? Buildings that are, we say, over 6 stories. So that means 6 plus a basement, you're in. 6 plus a cellar, a cellar doesn't count as a floor, so you're out. And very specifically, it's per elevation that we're talking about. So if it's a basement on that specific elevation, but not the others, you're still in. And it's not per the C of O. So a lot of times the C of O will say 6 stories. and then you go take a look at the building. The mechanical penthouse is more than 33% of the floor below. That's a floor to us. Or if the elevation in the rear of the building has 7 stories, a walkout cellar or walkout basement, on that elevation, it's 7 stories, that makes the building in. So just because it's 6 on the street doesn't necessarily mean that it's 6 all around. It could be more on one of the other elevations, which puts the whole building into the universe per the current rule. So what if your building is under 6 stories or 6 stories exactly and with the cellar? You don't need to do a thing, right? Owners don't need to maintain their building. No, they do. Owners of all buildings, not just in FISPs, are still required to maintain their buildings and maintain their buildings in a safe condition for the New York City Administrative Code 28301-1. Very important. The compliance reporting is simply that. It's compliance reporting. All owners must maintain their buildings safe. So just because you file a unsafe compliance report doesn't mean you're meeting your obligations in the current code and rule. And note, I would say, that code section 28301.1 requires owners or any individual associated with the building to notify the department of an unsafe condition. So a lot of you professionals are familiar with our unsafe notification, or the old terminology for the form was the FIS3 forms. We expect anybody who comes across an unsafe condition to report that to us. It's very important for us. So we'll go through a little bit of the history, as I mentioned, with regards to why we have this compliance reporting for facades. Excuse me. So often tragedies, unfortunately, lead to revisions to the rule or an expansion of DOB's enforcement capabilities. So a lot of you are familiar with the history. 1979, unfortunately, a young college student, Grace Gold, got hit by a piece of terracotta and tragically passed away. Local Law 10, as we refer to it, Local Law 10 of 1980, got passed, and Cycle 1 started at that time. And then Local Law 11 of 98 was a direct result of a collapse. Thankfully, no fatalities, but and there's a video of this. You can actually Google the video, and I believe Olga and Claudia showed the video in the FISP presentation earlier this week of the collapse at 540 Madison. So that led to the need to inspect all facades, all elevations on buildings over 6 stories, not just the ones within 25 feet of the street. And then moving on to 2015, we had a little girl pass away from another piece of terracotta falling on the Upper West Side. And that resulted to 2 things. The expansion of the facades unit, and the expansion, but also led to the rule revisions that came about in 2020. A lot of folks think the rule revision was a result of Erica Tishman passing away in 2019. But that rule revision was actually in the works since 2016, and we spent a lot of time on that rule revision with the industry and with folks inside here trying to get that revision to cover everything that we thought was missing, or not missing, but would cover up any holes that were in the past rule. And then 2020, we expanded the inspectorial staff in the facades unit. And we have 16 inspectors now, all, like I said, specifically trained to do facade inspections. And they're out there, and they're doing a great job. And they're out there inspecting in warm weather and cold weather. And their job is to make sure that the compliance reports that we're getting are um, taking into account all the conditions on the building. So that's important for us, making sure that these compliance reports are in fact correct and accurate. So as I mentioned, buildings over 6 stories are in, 6 plus a basement, but not a cellar. And then we have the critical examination, which we'll get into in a minute. We have the 5-year cycle and the sub-cycles that are associated with that, the A, Bs, and Cs, which are based on the block. 10107 is approved agencies, and that specifically goes over the requirements on how to become a QE. And 10107 was changed also in 2020, which increased the number of relevant years of experience that a QE must have. And that is for new QEs. So all the old QEs are grandfathered in with the relevant experience and the performance evaluations, but any new QEs must meet the new requirements. One thing to note, though, that we do list responsibilities of a QE, and that applies to new and old QEs. So everyone moving forward has to meet the new responsibilities. And one thing I'd like to point out is we have a great FAQ on our website now. It's been up for a little while. We've modified it here and there based on additional questions that the industry has been posing to us. We have some nice sketches about drop locations. We get a lot of questions about that. So please take a look at the FAQ. In general, check the Facade webpage. I believe we added some presentations onto the Facade webpage that we've done in the past. And this presentation will also be posted on the Build Safe, Live Safe site. But check in on the Facade webpage, because we do modify the webpage, and whatever questions that we get, and if we get a mass of the same question, then we'll add it to the FAQ, so everybody can hear the same answers on those questions. Okay, so the critical examination, like I mentioned, so this is not just an inspection program. Obviously, the inspection is the primary part of the critical examination, but there are some things that you need to consider, and I'll say must consider before you even do your inspections, right? So you have to review the previous FIFS reports. You have to understand the maintenance history on the building. What were the previous reports saying about the building? Was it safe? Was it unsafe? And doing a general history on the building. What type of permits, what type of alterations. If you have a good sense of the history on the building, it'll lead you to understand what type of inspections and where on the building. Do you need to do more than the minimum hands-on inspections? Do you need to target those hands-on inspections in specific areas of the building? So knowing the history on the building will allow you to not only do your inspections, but do them in a manner that will allow you to gain more information than just saying, I'm going to do, the bare minimum number of drops. And yes, the inspections are the key component of the critical examination, but then it's the follow-up, the photos and the mapping of the conditions, and we'll talk about mapping in a bit, and then it's the final inspection. So, quick summary of the rule. The law for facades, 28302. And specifically when it comes to unsafes, the rule talks, the law, excuse me, again, talks about unsafes very specifically with the regards to the reporting of the unsafes. So we need to be notified immediately of of um, of any unsafe condition that that's observed, again, by owners or professionals. The repairs should begin right away, if possible, but certainly public protection needs to be installed right away. And the law says that the repairs need to be completed within 90 days, or if you can't complete that within 90 days, then you need to submit extensions. And so there's initial inspections and then initial extension requests and then additional extension requests. And I have to just point out that you have to make sure that you're submitting your extensions every 90 days if you have not completed your repairs and ready to submit an amended report. The DOB Now system is very specific. If those extensions expire, then civil penalties will start accruing. So in order to avoid the civil penalties, please make sure that you get your extensions in on time and continue and follow up with those extensions. So why do we have extensions? A lot of people ask me that question. Well, number one, first and foremost, we want to make sure that the public protection is still in place for the duration of the unsafe status of the building. We want to see some progress with regards to the repairs of the unsafe conditions. So every 90 days, we want to see that, and the progress doesn't necessarily need to be construction, although we'd love to see that the construction is moving ahead and the repairs are being performed. But it's possible that you're going through the bidding phase. You've hired a professional, they've produced drawings, they've filed the drawings. That's progress for us also. So we'd like to see every step of the way, every 90 days, some sort of progress. That's important for us. And I'll just mention swamp conditions. You cannot carry over swamp conditions from cycle to cycle. And let me be specific. It's the same condition should not be repeated over and over again in the same location. If you have a swamp condition in one location and you repair that, and then you have the same swamp condition in another location, that can be filed swamp again. That's fine. What we don't want to see is the same swamp condition in the same location observed, repaired, observed, repaired over and over again. And we've been seeing a lot of that. For us, that repair just means that it wasn't done correctly. And we want those repairs to not just fix the condition that's being observed on the facade, but the repair should fix the underlying condition. Why is that crack on the facade? Is the column behind behind that crack corroding and causing that to spall or to open up? Then the expectation is that you fix that underlying condition and then fix the crack on the brick on the outside, for example. So these are things that we've been talking about for a long time here in the facades unit, and we want to ensure that this is happening. And the repetition of the swamp conditions is something that we're wary of. So as I mentioned, unsafe conditions, you have to call it in right away, and that can be 311 or 911 if you think it's an emergency situation. You should certainly file the unsafe notification or the FIS3 form And that can be done by any professional. That does not have that you don't have to be a QE to file that, and you don't have to be affiliated with the building. That can be filed at any time. And then the extensions, and then the amended report. So as I mentioned before, building owners are also required to report unsafe conditions by code. And then the public protection goes up. That has to be immediate. And like I said, make sure you're getting those extensions in every 90 days. That's important. And we talk about public protection, and we always see sidewalk sheds as the go-to for public protection. But you can fence or close off an area. That's also public protection. You can remove the unsafe condition, or you can net. So all of those are forms of public protection. And what leads to the public protection? And most of the time, and I'm saying most of the time, not all the time, but it's an owner's lack of maintenance that leads to the public protection. Plain and simple. So it's the owner that is causing the installation of the public protection. Does it occur on occasion that an unsafe condition develops? Sure, it's possible. We had an unsafe condition on a building in Midtown that the professional identified for us. It was one isolated condition this week, and the owner hired some folks to do some IRA work and remove the unsafe condition, and they checked the rest of the facade, and the rest of the facade was in good shape. So do occasional unsafe conditions develop? Sure, it's possible. It is possible. However, the large amount of time we're talking about just lack of maintenance, and it's that simple. We've already discussed that an owner must maintain their building in a safe condition, and that's the expectation, and that's what we're holding owners to. So we'll go real quickly through the 3 different statuses that a report can be filed. Safe, we like that. We like when a building is filed safe, as long as it truly is safe, first and foremost. And our inspectors, like I said, we now have 16 of them in the facades unit. Our inspectors are now inspecting safes and swamps. When I first joined the department, gosh, almost 7 years ago now. Hard for me to actually believe I've been here 7 years. But we did very few safe and swamp inspections when I first started, and we realized, unfortunately, that sometimes we just can't take these reports for granted, and maybe the safe is not necessarily safe. But the expectations with the safe is that basically no repairs are going to need to happen on that building for a minimum of 5 years into the next cycle. Is it possible that some maintenance needs to happen? Sure, that's certainly a possibility, but no repairs. And it's 5+ years is the expectation. SWAMP to us, or Safe with a Repair and Maintenance Program, yet another acronym that we like to throw out there in the facade world. Is in our mind, SWAMP is a precursor for a facade repair program. And what we like to, and we made the revision to the definition of SWAMP, is if you see a condition that needs to be repaired within 1 to 5 years. And that's right in the definition right now. So if you see a condition that is not going to last into the next cycle, the 5+ years, and needs to be repaired, then that's your SWAMP conditions. And like I said, we talked about the unsafes prior, and we talked about unsafes needing to get repaired within 90 days per the law. But for us, an unsafe condition is anything that might need a repair within a year. So if you take out your crystal ball, the professionals out there, all of you have crystal balls and know exactly, when these conditions are going to degrade into it. Obviously, just joking with that, but it's up to their up to your professional opinion, is this condition need to be repaired within a year? If so, then it's unsafe. So, and what comes with the unsafes is the public protection, the notification, and the extensions in the amended report. And then obviously in there is the repairs of the unsafe condition. So we'll get into the reports themselves, and some highlights um, of the reports listed there. The QE can do the inspections themselves, or they can have somebody delegate that um, on their end. But they always have to supervise the work. And the expectation is that the QE is the one ultimately responsible for the report and what's in the report, most importantly. And that's critical for us. So the rule does allow for the QE to delegate the inspections, but at the end of the day, the QE is the one signing and sealing the report, and those are the folks that we're going to hold responsible for the reports. So now we'll get into the rule revisions that we had in 2020, and there were a lot of them. So we're just going to highlight the major ones, but please go through and read the rule yourself. It's pretty dense, has a lot of information. And why did we make the rule changes? I mentioned it before. Yes, there was a fatality on the Upper West Side, and then one in Times Square. And we said, well, we need just to raise the bar on the minimum standards for both owners and professionals. So a lot of people think that we were just raising the bar on the reports, but it's not just that. The expectations from owners, while not directly indicated in the report, a lot of the information that we and a lot of the rule changes that we made were very specific with regards to owners. And plain and simply, we were trying to enhance public safety with the rule revisions. We're trying to push owners and professionals to make repairs that last multiple cycles. Many of the costs associated with doing facade work is just getting to the area to do the work. Again, we're talking about buildings over 6 stories. So we're talking about pipe scaffolding, hanging scaffolds. It's expensive to get to these locations to do this work. And then the general conditions associated with all of that. So that is the majority of the costs for doing a lot of the work. You're there, so do the right repairs. Repair the condition on the facade and repair the underlying condition. And if you need to do additional work to make those repairs last multiple cycles, why go through the pain of paying for access multiple times? And why go through the pain of doing a facade restoration on your building multiple times when you can make those repairs last multiple cycles? So the biggest change, and I think most people will agree with this, is the requirement for the hands-on inspections. So not only did we specify an increase in the number of hands-on inspections and specify a specific distance, but previously the rule only had a drop along one street face. We changed that to fronting the public right away. And I know there's been a large amount of questions with what does that mean specifically. And we've discussed this numerous times. The public right away for us is defined in the rule. And the and it's very specifically if I'm walking along the sidewalk and I can walk off the sidewalk onto either the private property or directly up to the facade, and walk up to that building elevation, that's the public right of way. I'm not associated with the building, and if I can walk right up to that facade, even if it's on private property, that's the public right of way for us. Um, and it's important to understand that and make sure that the drops that you outline with regards to the compliance reporting take that into account. And something that we ask is that the drops are evenly distributed along the various elevations along the public right of way. And I'll refer over to the FAQs again that we have on our website. We have sketches of not your standard buildings on our FAQs that talk about what's public right of way, and talks about how you break up the 60 feet in terms of how you add up, which elevations you need to add up, and how you can distribute those drops. So again, please take a look at the FAQs. And technology, the use of technology. So right now, in the rule, it's very specific that the use of technology does not replace hands-on inspections. One thing that Jill and another individual, Wendy, in Tech Affairs has been working on for the last, gosh, I gotta say year plus, is looking into various technologies and discussing with various stakeholders in the industry on how technology is being used and what we can do with that technology. And everything that we are hearing to date is everyone is saying the same thing. Whatever technology you're using, it needs to be verified by independent close-up inspections. And not only that, but it needs to be evaluated in-house by an engineer or an architect that has experience doing facade work. So technology does not replace it, it merely enhances. It's another tool in the toolbox that the industry has. And it's a great tool, and it should be used. It just can't replace hands-on inspections. And we talk about probes and cavity walls. And why did we require probes and cavity walls in the most recent rule change? We had numerous number of failures with cavity walls. And cavity wall construction, for those of you that are not familiar, became very, very popular post-World War II. Specifically in the late 50s, early 60s, came to be the most commonly installed facade type in the city. And if you heard me talk in the past, we had, our top three issues, cavity walls, terracotta, specifically terracotta repairs, and glass. And then I hope everybody listened into Olga and Claudia's presentation from earlier in the week. Unfortunately, we're adding a fourth item to our list. We've had a rash of failures when it comes to EIFS or EIFS, depending on how you like to pronounce that. So we've had a rash of failures when it comes to EIFS. So we're looking at what we can do with all of these failures, and specifically in cavity walls, most of the failures stem from lack of ties or just the ties that were installed in the 50s and 60s have no protection. They were basic metal, no galvanization, no stainless steel, just carbon steel, and they're corroded right now. Right, they've lasted their lifespan has expired. And starting in cycle 9, the expectation is that um, that probes are conducted to confirm the spacing and the condition of the ties. And we get a lot of questions um, with regards to, do I need to do the probes? Can I supplement as an alternative? And the answer is yes. Reach out to us. A lot of folks have asked about NDT in combination, not on its own, but again in combination with doing potentially load tests, boroscopes. So there's a lot of technology out there that could possibly replace probes in this specific instance. And there's some carve outs also in the rule with regards to new buildings, and if a building underwent a repair campaign in the last 10 years, and we have special inspection reports that very specifically outline what was installed. So a lot of that can replace the probes. And then do we need a permit for probes? So RCNY 10114 outlines permitting requirements, and most of the probes that we're talking about here would fall under minor work and don't require a permit. So please take a look at 10114. It has very specific requirements on what needs to have a permit and what doesn't. And it should be fairly clear. Photo requirements of cavity wall probes. We want to make sure that we're getting the information in the reports and ensure that that the probes are being done. And then mapping. So I love the mapping picture that we always have, and if you notice, we changed it specifically for this Build Safe, Live Safe presentation. I was joking with Claudia and Olga that they took my 3D rendering away and put this one in, but this is also a fun picture that shows what we're talking about with the mapping. And it's a one-word change that we made in the rule, but the expectation is that you document all the conditions that you observe during your inspections on an elevation, on marked up photographs, combination. We just want it to be clear where all the conditions observed are for a multitude of reasons. Number one, so we know where all the conditions are. But when cycle 10 happens and we look back at the cycle 9 report, we can compare. You can compare, we can compare, and we can see what exactly has transpired. Unsafe timeframes. Previously, we only had a requirement for swamp timeframes, and now we're asking for unsafe timeframes as well. And this is in an effort to hopefully minimize public protection that's out there, limiting owners from filing unsafes repeatedly from cycle to cycle. Once that unsafe timeframe is expired, you will not be able to file extensions anymore, and civil penalties will start accruing. So it's very important that we take these unsafes very seriously and that owners do the repairs. And what we're talking about with the repairs, as I mentioned before, and specifically we talk about this in the revised rule, is the repeated swamp conditions as well as I mentioned before, is a problem for us. Don't do the caulk repair. Fix the condition correctly the first time, and because we're checking whether or not the swamp conditions are repeating from cycle to cycle. Again, something that's important for us to make sure that the repairs are being done correctly. And then a lot of people ask, when can I take the shed down on the unsafes? The shed should be in place until the amended report is accepted by the department. So let me repeat that. The sheds need to stay in place until the amended report is accepted by us. Submitting the amended report doesn't mean you can take the shed down. We do an inspection on 100% of all amended reports. Yeah, 100% of all amended reports get inspected. If we don't see public protection, then the inspector will issue a violation. So make sure the public protection remains in place. There is a possibility on DOB Now Safety that you can issue a partial shed removal request. So you can take advantage of that for possibly removing sections of the shed. So it's important that in either of those situations that you remain in compliance with the public protection requirements. And civil penalties. Olga went over this in the FISP presentation earlier in the week, but we basically at a minimum quadrupled the civil penalties, and we added a new civil penalty for swamps. And for you owners out there, if you're looking to buy a building, make sure you do your due diligence. Civil penalties transfer over from owners to owners. So just because you are the new owner in a building doesn't mean you're exempt from taking into account all the previous civil penalties that the old owner had. So make sure you do your homework and take a look at those specific requirements. And then the posting of the conditions certificate. And this is all about making the condition of the building publicly available. It is on DOB Now, but specifically we want the tenants of the building to know exactly what the conditions of the building are. So we want those posted and make sure that the conditions certificate, you go on there, you print them out, and make sure that it's posted right now. There was some misunderstandings with the way the rule is written, but the way the rule is written is all buildings, whether you have filed your Cycle 9 report or not, need to have a condition certificate posted. And our inspectors are looking for those condition certificates, so please make sure you post those. Okay, so that's it for facades. I'm going to go on to sprinklers, and I'll spend a little bit less time on sprinklers, and then Jill will take over. You guys have heard me ramble on enough, so you can hear somebody else in a couple minutes here. But sprinklers, and specifically Local Law 26 of 04. So the Department of Buildings convened a World Trade Center Building Code Task Force in March of 2002. And that was a direct result of the events of 9/11. That task force outlined a whole list of recommendations in early 2003, February 2003. And then our former mayor, Michael Bloomberg, on June 24th, 2004, signed the majority of those recommendations into law. And a lot of those, specifically 3 of those, became Local Law 26 of 2004. And one of those is the requirements for office buildings over 100 feet in height to have sprinklers. And so yes, this law does go back to 2004. It's one of the few laws that is retroactive to all buildings. So most of the time when we pass a law, it's specifically we draw the line in the sand, and everything moving forward needs to comply with that law. That's not the case here. And the reason why this was given such a long time frame to come into compliance is because this is retroactive to all buildings. And we'll get into some specific exemptions and all that. So here we are 17 years later, we're still talking about it. The deadline was 2 years ago, and we still have quite a few buildings that have not submitted these reports. And as I mentioned, this is a direct result of what was studied that occurred on the events of 9/11. And the sprinklers in office buildings, in my understanding, it's twofold. Number one, people in office buildings don't specifically know exactly where the egress pathways or the emergency exits are in buildings. You know, they're not specifically living in those buildings. And then office buildings can have a high number of people in them as compared to residential buildings. So that local law added 27929.1 into the building code, into the 68 building code, which required, as I said, office buildings over 100 feet needing to be sprinklered. So going back in time a little bit, there were two local laws prior to 2004 that were issued, specifically Local Law 16 of '84 required buildings to have sprinklers, exit lighting, exit signs, and so that was a line in the sand, as we like to call it, for a lot of office buildings. So what buildings are exempt? So I mentioned Local Law of 16 of '84. So anything that was permitted after that local law, specifically high-rise office buildings, and continuing on in the 2008 and 2014 code, would have had sprinklers. It was a requirement since '84, and therefore any buildings that were permitted after that are exempt from the reporting requirements because we know they have sprinklers in them. If a building was pre 1984 and had sprinklers installed and signed off before the effective date of the local law, then those buildings simply need to file what we refer to as the attachment A in terms of the reporting requirements. And one thing I'll note is the sprinkler page. You can just simply go to the department's website and look and search for LL 2604. We have a long list of FAQs on there, and there's a nice bulletin that we reference as well that goes through this very specifically with a nice flow chart. So please take a look at those FAQs as well. And lastly, if the building was pre-'84 but did not elect to install sprinklers, and those are the buildings that need to install their sprinklers and comply with the full reporting requirement of the new local law. One thing to note, extensions were eligible, but that has come and gone, so there are no more extensions allowed. And I mentioned this was started in 2004. We had 3 interim reports that were required, and then the final report. And here we are almost 2 years later, and the final report was due, and we still have 381 buildings that have not filed the report. So 17 years later, and 2 years past the deadline, we still have some non-compliance and a large number of buildings that are non-compliance with this critical public safety outreach, public safety issue, excuse me. So with everything today, please help us outreach to owners, to professionals, to everybody, so they're aware of these critical public safety compliance reporting issues, and let's make the city a better place and safer for everyone. With that, Jill is going to take over, and she's going to talk about retaining walls and parking structures. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I want to afford Antonio the certain amount of time, so I may blow through this a little quick. Retaining walls. So yeah, with retaining walls, it is compliance filing, as is the main overarching topic of this talk. Cycle 1 is complete. Cycle 2 is now open. We're about actually halfway through cycle 2. We've issued about violations to 1,300, a little over 1,300 properties. Basically, what are the requirements for retaining walls? If your wall is 10 feet high or 10 feet or higher and faces a public right of way, a public right of way being sidewalk, street, if it faces like a park, anything that the public has access to, then you need to file with us. We are working on refining our population. Retaining walls, unfortunately, by default, are kind of hard to find, so we're working on that. We're doing some, similar to Yigal talked about QEs, we have QRWIs. We don't have a nice little phrase like QE to say, so we just have to spell it out, QRWI, but it's a similar process. We interview people, we get them to file with us, and then we're also doing outreach. As you can tell, we're big fans of outreach, Yigal and I. So what are we talking about? These are some retaining walls. On the previous slide, you'll see that we mentioned that we do work with public agencies. A lot of these retaining walls are covered, are under the jurisdiction of other agencies, MTA, parks, DOT, and we are working with them as well. So just because they're not, it's not just the private owners we're working with, it's also the other public agencies. And like I said, I'll go through this pretty quickly. History of code ownership. Basically through 1855, 1916, there was this concept of, who owns the wall. There's the high side, there's the low side. They both benefit, but somebody is causing, if I decide to put my property on a lower space or a higher space, I need to put a wall. And the ownership kind of changed over the years. And the reason why that's important is because, as you saw on the previous slides, we issue violations, right? Notice of violations saying that you have to file with us. So whose responsibility is it? So that's why this ownership becomes an issue. I would recommend, if you think you are dealing with a retaining wall of this, that needs to file with us, go over the ownership issues and, see who's actually responsible. Obviously, the maintenance and engineering has changed over the years as we've become more knowledgeable. It's gone from being very prescriptive, which was basically, if you have a 4-foot high wall, you need a 1-foot minimum bottom, 20-foot high wall, 5-foot minimum at the base, to, actually doing analysis with like earthquake loads, lateral loads, sliding, overturning, more like, and it's gone from prescriptive to engineering. But most of the walls we deal with do kind of fall into this like 1899, 1916 kind of era of when they were the walls that we're dealing with for the most part. As we always mention, if you've heard Yigal and I present, or anybody on our team, 301.1, just because you don't have to file with us does not mean that you don't have to maintain your building or your structure. And that's what I like to include this in the retaining walls. It's, we are the building department, but it does constitute structures as well. So all buildings and all parts thereof, and all structures, like a retaining wall, you need to maintain it safe. So yeah, Local Law 37 came out in 2008. Again, 10 feet high, facing public right of way. Similar to FISP, you have to do every 5 years, qualified retaining wall inspector. You submit our report, we review it, we accept it, we reject it. Depending on, because there's a minimum amount of things we want to see, which I'll go over in a bit. And again, this local law, like what happens to a lot of local laws, it becomes folded into the building code. So this became section 28-305.4. And I believe, I hope I'm not making a liar of myself, but basically I think, the third chapter of the administrative code is the compliance filings. You have 302, which is facades, 305 is retaining walls, 323, which I will talk about, which you don't know about yet because it's just being reviewed by these guys across the street at City Council and whatnot. Now will be parking structures, which I'll talk about. And I believe Antonio's elevators and boilers also falls into chapter 3, I believe. So he'll talk about that. So yeah, reporting requirements as promised. Again, similar to FISP, we want the general information, the property owner, property profile, how was the condition assessment performed, what was done, were there any probes done, what kind of calculations were done. We want to see a cross section. We want to know that the QRWI has done an adequate investigation and assessment. We want to see an analysis. We want to see numbers. What's the factor of safety? It's, again, similar to, you're going to hear me say this a lot, similar to FISP. FISP has been around for 41 years. Retaining walls, I guess 12 years now, 13 years. Parking structures is going to be new. but they do have similar underlying requirements. So if there's areas of distress in the retaining wall, take photos of it. And then of course the final rating. You have your safe on one side, you have your unsafe on the other. And then with retaining walls, in between, we have safe with repair and or engineering monitoring, and safe with minor repairs or maintenance. So we kind of break it up into two categories. And I'll talk a little bit about the engineering monitoring later. Like in the next slide. So here we are, safe with repair and engineering monitoring. What is a monitoring program? I don't know how many times we get letters saying, oh, we recommend monitoring. Okay, that's nice. What is that monitoring? What does that constitute? What does that consist of? Who is doing the monitoring? We want specifics, because we don't want to just, we want to know that, this is being thought about, that this wall is being addressed, especially if it falls into these sort of middle categories. Stability analysis, as I mentioned, with the factor of safety. And especially, again, this is kind of crucial with these two categories, because we want to know that, what is that factor of safety that prevents it from being unsafe? It's pretty important. And then minor repairs or maintenance, what's the time frame? And then, again, similar to FISP, unacceptable time frames, ASAP, less than a year, immediately, because then that would be unsafe. So yeah, unsafe, the owner has to commence repairs immediately, or else, at the very minimum, take measures to protect the public. This could take the form of cordoning off certain areas, limiting access, by building a construction fence, whatever, basically so that people can't get to the collapse zone of this unsafe wall. Call 311. Obviously, if it's an incident, if something actually has collapsed already, call 911. But call 311 and then email us. You can see the email address is there. And then within 2 weeks, get the QRWI to reinspect. And then once the permits are signed off, we realize not all repairs can be done in 2 weeks, but similar, file for extensions, and then eventually file an amended report correcting that unsafe condition. This is the form. What I'll briefly highlight, and again, similar to FISP, two things here. There's two people that have to sign, the QRWI and the owner. Basically, the QRWI is attesting that they have provided this report to the owner, and the owner is attesting to the fact that they have read the report and understand that any required repairs. And this is very important for us. So this way, an owner can't say to us, "Oh, I didn't know." So they're literally signing their name saying that they've read the report. So this is important. Fee structure, initial, amended, extensions, fees attached with that. I don't think these have been updated recently, so, these may go up. I don't know, don't quote me. And then, of course, we're not on DOB now yet. I don't know if that's good or bad news to you guys, but we're not on DOB now. Eventually, we'll get there. I'm not sure what the time frame is on that, but we are accepting, obviously in these COVID times, not in person, but you can email. We prefer the email, or you can mail it to us. But email is definitely preferred, and this email box is monitored by a few people pretty regularly, so it shouldn't get lost. Civil penalties, again, these kind of mirror what the old facade penalties were. $1,000 per year for failure to file, $250 per month until compliance, and then failure to repair an unsafe condition, $1,000 per month. Yeah, these are cycles. Like I said, we're kind of almost smack dab in the middle of cycle 2. And this is a rough population. We are working on, further refining our population, but this is the rough breakdown. So yeah, we stagger the cycles by borough, so per year. So what did we, how did cycle 1 go for us? We issued in October 2019, I believe, we issued violations for no report filed. We had gotten a few reports, but not that many. So yeah, we issued 1,345 violations. We received 778 submissions. Of these, 691 were not subject. Either they weren't on the public right of way. A lot of them fell under the jurisdiction of MTA. I know there's a big press thing about that about a year or so ago, year and a half ago. Didn't quite meet the height criteria. Again, like I said, retaining walls are they're not as obvious to find as buildings. They're a little harder. So we're working on it. And then we reviewed 87 tier 16s. And we are doing secondary enforcement as per usual. And we'll send DOB violations to the design professionals. Again, DOB violations, as I'm sure you've heard us say before, there's no penalty. there's no fiscal penalty, there's no court date. But we do want to request the additional information because we are, our engagement with this requirement is still being refined, and we're trying to work with you. We're trying to work with the industry. Okay, so you want to be a QRWI? Great. Who can be a QRWI? Unfortunately, it's only PEs, so sorry, RAs. But PEs, you need 3 years of relevant experience. And then you submit to us a resume, full deliverable for 3 retaining wall projects, deliverables, drawings, calculations, any inspection reports, field reports, what have you. And then you'll be interviewed by us or by our staff. And yeah, and so we encourage you to do that if you're interested. Can you submit a report if you're not a QRWI? You can, actually. We're not quite as strict as the FISP and QE, but again, the FISP and QE requirements have been around for a very long time, so that's a very kind of robust population. QRWI, we are establishing that, and we're building our group. But we will ask you, if you're not a QRWI, but you submit a report, we will ask you to become a QRWI. I think we have about 30 people these days. Yeah, so yeah, we need you. That's why we like to do this outreach. We rely on professionals like you. We rely on the people on this call. I think there's about 225 of you or something. Reach out to your ownership groups. Reach out to the people, your colleagues. Somebody couldn't make it to this lecture, but they desperately wanted to. Share this with them. We need you guys, and we'd like to work with you guys as well. So yeah, I see we're getting a lot of questions. We'll try and answer. And if we don't get to your question, I'll say this generally, if we don't get to your question, we probably will in the coming days or the coming weeks. Some stuff we may need to, look up. We don't, we consider ourselves somewhat smart, but sometimes we have to actually go back and read. I always joke that I have the memory of a goldfish, so, anyway, but yeah, so contact us if you would like us to present to your office. We love doing these presentations. We're looking forward to the days when we can do them in person, but Yigal and I have also done many presentations virtually as well, so we've gotten pretty good at that. Like a lot of us, I suppose. So let us know if you would like us to present. Like I said, I'm kind of blowing through this stuff. Oh, I just realized I did this whole presentation in 11 minutes. Wow, because we kind of need it. Well, I still have to do parking structures. And I do want to spend more time on parking structures because that is still new and about to come out. But again, if you would like a more, maybe where I talk a little slower and a little more in depth on this QRWI presentation or retaining wall presentation, just let us know. So now, parking structures. Actually, can you hand me more water? Thanks. Parking structures, excuse me. Parking structures, like I said, it's going to be part of the new code. It is was introduced into City Council, I think, last week. Excuse me. And so that is being, I guess, reviewed or debated or whatever's going on over there. So how did we come about? Why are we adding this new this new section to the code? And this presentation is going to involve going a little bit into the background, how we kind of came to realize the need and whatnot. So parking structure, New York City is kind of unique. I mean, it's a city, right? And cities are different than you go in the suburbs. You go to you go to the mall or whatever, and you park in this separate parking garage, and then you walk over to the mall, or you take an elevator, which Antonio will talk about, or something like that. But here, it's like, yes, we have that. My favorite reference is the Kings Plaza Mall, but we also have in this very building where I'm giving this presentation, 280 Broadway, it is an office building, but we've got, I think it's 2 floors of parking structure at the base. And we know about that, right? Because it's a commercial parking. It files with the Department of Consumer Affairs, who are very kind to share their list of licenses with us. But then you also have, how many residences have parking structure in the basement. And those were a little harder to find. State law, there was a state law that came, I think I'll go into this more a little later, but a state law came out a few years ago saying that, they similar to FISP, but different. They go in a 3-year cycle that they have to do a condition assessment and file. And they did their filing requirements depending on how old the structure was. And I think their first, I get into this later, so I won't dwell on it now. And then also, whenever anything like this comes up, we do start analyzing our population. Is it a problem in New York City? I mean, because we're not like Elmira or Utica or any of those places. You know what I mean? It's like we're a little bit different. So is it a problem? Is this something we need to think about? What are the special concerns with parking structures? And then we're going to go over the proposed code requirements and talk a little bit about the associated rule, because as you know, in FISP you have code 302, rule 10304, retaining walls code 305, rule 10309, parking structures code 323. Rule will be 103-13, I believe, and we are drafting that rule. And I always put it that the code tells you what you have to do. The rule tells you how you should do it. So the code is you have to file a report with us. The rule is the report needs to have X number of photographs, so on and so forth. So yeah, the locations that we're concerned with, they fall into different categories, kind of like I said, detached, the basement of a residential building, sometimes they're on the roof, which can be hard to find. There are different materials here in New York City. A lot of reinforced concrete, that's kind of like the standard, but some steel. We've even had some wood parking structures. And these materials degrade at a different rate. And they also degrade differently under a vehicle load than just like a office or residential load, obviously. How many levels? Ownership. Ownership is tricky because again, with the commercial structures, often the parking structure will lease out, from the building or the condo owner or whatever. So then it becomes whose responsibility is it? And we have presented to ownership groups, and I think we're going to present to actually a group that represents actually like parking association or whatever. And so that becomes, and this isn't, for the people on this, call, probably not as a pertinent thing, but ownership issues can be tricky, shall we say. So the state law, as I promised I was going to talk more about it, periodic condition assessment every 3 years. It did become effective about 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago. Again, oldest buildings had to be reported first. And now New York City is exempt from state laws. I'm never 100% clear on this, so don't quote me, but I think it's something like because we're over 1 million people, we kind of have a little bit of autonomy to a certain extent. Obviously not completely, but we can kind of make our way. So what are we talking about? This is what we're talking about, right? All of these are New York City. The one on the left, I'm sure you're very, if you are from out of town, you're probably very familiar, come to the city for the day. Where am I going to park? Midtown Manhattan, there you are. Top right, this is, maybe in northern Manhattan, the Bronx or something. Bottom right, I always like to point out the boats. We're obviously right by the, at the very edge of Brooklyn, I think. So, it comes in all shapes and sizes for us. And again, one thing I want to point out is, for us to find our population, to determine our population, the one on the bottom right is easy, right? You just, Department of Finance classification garage. There you go. Good to go. The one on the left, a little harder, right? Because it's an office building. So and again, that's where our friends at the Department of Consumer Affairs have helped us out. But then ones in residences, that becomes a little, can become a little harder. What is our population? If some of you, eagle-eyed viewers may remember, I did this presentation, a similar presentation on a couple different venues, and I said that we had 2,100. Well, we, again, we're always doing, new and creative ways to try and find our population, and we did that, and we had our inspectors going out. They were going out on sweeps related to COVID, and we said, hey, while you're out, why don't you let us know if you see any parking garages? And they did, and so we added 700 more garages to our population, so which is nice. And this is our distribution, kind of as to be expected. Manhattan, lion's share. Brooklyn and Queens, similar. Bronx, not as much as Brooklyn and Queens, but still a lot. In Staten Island, we have 30. We may have more. I mean, we're still, like I said, we always continue to refine our population. Structures not included, unenclosed, unattached, so it's basically a parking lot. And then the 1 and 2 family parking structures, parking garages, you don't have to file with us. It's fine. But reminder, 28-301.1, you still have to maintain it in a safe condition. Oh yeah, and one thing I want to point out, sorry, the unenclosed comma unattached, that's an and, as in unenclosed and unattached. So if yours is unenclosed, but it's attached, i.e. it's on a roof or something, it counts. Or if it's enclosed, but oh, I'm gonna get myself confused now. If it's enclosed but unattached, I mean, it still counts, right? So it's the unenclosed, unattached, that is a parking lot, basically. Yes, thank you. You all just confirmed. As soon as I started talking, I was like, I'm going to get myself in trouble here. He bails me out as per usual. So yeah, so what is our distribution? You know, we ran the numbers, and as of now, you know, this could change as we, you know, get more information. But we think this is pretty robust at this point. So you can see that they're mostly residential, about 2/3 residential, elevator apartments and other residential. And then garage, just standalone garage, 14%. Offices, not as many as I was expecting, but you know, still, you know, I always say, like with FISP, it's like there's 1.1 million buildings, and you ask people who are, you know, didn't see Gall's presentation, how many FISP buildings are there? Like, oh, 100,000. It's like, no, it's only 16,000. So, you know, New York, you know, it's a wily creature, shall we say? Okay, so now the next thing. Okay, so we have 2,800 structures, right? State law says you have to do this thing. Is this a problem? I mean, as I said, our parking structures are a little different than those in, you know, upstate New York. So how do we do it? First, we took our population and then we said, okay, how many class 1 violations do we get per year? You know, we crunch those numbers, we get 10. Okay, well, that's, you know, not a lot. But we receive 60 complaints a year. Okay, so let's think about this. You have 60 complaints, and of those 60 complaints, you get 10 class 1 violations. Now, class 1 violation is our like highest, you know, most hazardous violation. So that means 1 in 6 of complaints is getting a class 1 violation. Okay, so now the numbers are starting to kind of make sense. And then we get 2 incidents per year, and I'll show you some pictures of incidents in the next couple slides. So basically, of 60 complaints, 1 in 30 is an incident. Okay, so I mean the numbers are pretty severe. So I'm going to talk a little bit later about why that may be the case. But yeah, so it basically we determine it is a concern, and it becomes like, you know, what do we know about, what don't we know about, and how do we find out what we don't know about? This was a incident in Staten Island, actually. This, you know, nice woman was having her morning coffee, and then all of a sudden she heard a pop, and her kitchen floor sank a few inches. Of course, she got out of there, called us. We go out, and you know, if you actually look at the base of that column, it's a steel column, and again, 4-story structure. You can see on the bottom left there is where the entrance to the garage is, and you see that there's, you know, the column has severely deteriorated. And actually, if you get down onto ground level, you can actually see right through the column. There's like nothing left. So they had, by the time I got there, they had immediately shored it, and then they repaired the column under permit. But, you know, the fact of the matter is, you know, how did it get like this? You know, nobody was looking. Nobody, or if somebody was looking, you know, they didn't have that trained eye to say, oh, this may be a problem. This one is a little more dramatic. This was, yeah, this is up in the Bronx, partial collapse of a post-tension, I think, post-tension concrete structure. Huh? Drape mesh. Oh, I thought it was post-tension. Okay, anyway, drape mesh structure. Yeah, whatever. It was concrete, some form of reinforced concrete, and yeah, and obviously collapsed. I mean, look at those cars. How many cars? You know, how many people lost their mode of transportation there? There's like 20 cars. And then, of course, like, how do you fix this? I mean, there was talk of like, you know, opening up the roof and getting a helicopter and all this crazy stuff. I think they ended up just shoring and then like slowly pulling stuff out. But yeah, so they did it. You know, the end result is they did, you know, they got all the cars out. They did a partial demo. They renovated into a new gym, which sounds great. But then it's like, look at all this parking that's missing. I personally don't have a car, which is ironic considering I've given this presentation so many times. But I know that parking in the city is not easy. You know, both from when I you know, have to take a DOB car home, or you know, just go anywhere and whatnot. So I mean, look at all these parking spaces we're now missing because, you know, this collapsed, and then, you know, they didn't want to rebuild it into another parking structure. And so yes, we have a problem, and these are things we need to look at on a regular basis. So very quickly, state law versus New York City Code. This was the service notice that came out that we issued right after the state law came out, basically saying that the city of New York maintains its own building requirements. don't worry about the state. And we still get calls, people saying, wait, what about the state law? Do we have to do that? And we're like, just hold on. We'll don't worry, we'll have you do something. We'll get there eventually. So then what is going to be in the code? Condition assessments every 6 years, right? So our thinking was, the state laws every 3 years. We don't think our parking structures aren't as, aggressively attacked as they are upstate. We have less snow. They're maybe not used as much. They're not, more often than not, they're not open to the elements like those, open parking structures are. But yeah, it needs to be, again, performed by an engineer, professional engineer. And we also want to see an annual observation checklist, which we're going to get into, more into the rule. And that's basically where you have either like, the garage steward, the building superintendent, it doesn't need to be like an engineer, but the engineer needs to develop the list and say, keep an eye on this, keep an eye on that, so on and so forth. And then that annual observation checklist is going to need to be a part of the report. So that observation needs to be performed annually, the actual condition assessment every 6 years. And also that observation doesn't need to be filed with us, but we will want to see it. Like if something happens, we're going to ask for it. And obviously, as always, if there is, whether it's during the actual every 6-year condition assessment or the annual observation or any time in between, if anybody notices anything, an unsafe condition, notify us immediately. Again, very similar, safe, unsafe, safe with repair and/or engineering monitoring. We want to see a record of all potentially unsafe conditions. What is the condition of the structural framing members? Is any reinforcement visible? What's the condition of the connections, the slab joints? And again, observation checklist also needs to be included. So similar to retaining walls and the facades unit, safe with repair and/or engineering monitoring. What is the program? Again, we want to know what are you specifically looking at? Not just needs to be monitored. Like, nice, I need to monitor my bottle of water. You know what I mean? We want to see what is going into that monitoring program. Is there crack monitors, survey every 6 months? What does that program look like? And then again, the stability analysis, what is the factor of safety? We want to see some actual numbers. And then similar to unsafe, protect the public. If there's an area of a slab that, is crumbling that you think is unsafe, cordon off area above and below. In parking garages, that's, generally pretty easy. Notify us and then, repair the condition. So yeah, the code, like I said, is being reviewed by our friends across the street. We're expecting it to be published within a year. I think there will be a provision for parking structure evaluation. However, we are developing the rule, and the rule is going to go into effect January 1st, 2022. So we are going to open up, you can file your first parking structure report on January 1st. You will have 2 years. We're still determining how exactly the subcycles are going to break out. But it will be 2 years. So the first deadline won't be until January 1st, 2024. And probably if we do get filings in those first few months, they will be manual, similar to retaining walls, but it is being developed in DOB now, that module. So it'll be in DOB now safety, similar to facades. And we're expecting that by summer 2022. So yeah, as I mentioned, there's going to be 2 subcycles broken down by borough. And I think this is my last, or I have 2 more slides, just contact information. And again, you don't need to feverishly scribble this down. These presentations will be available on the building's website. And I think I've actually given Antonio 2 minutes extra because I talked so fast. So he will present to you now about elevators and boilers. And just a heads up, Yigal and I are lucky in that we can work in tandem and answer your questions because we both kind of cover the same things. Antonio is flying solo. So all of your questions will be answered at the end because Yigal and I know nothing about boilers or elevators other than the fact that they keep us warm and take us places. So without further ado, Antonio.
Hello, everyone. My name is Antonio Policorpo. I am the Administrative Director for Boilers and Elevators. Our primary function is to oversee the handling of these compliance filings and also the enforcement piece, issuing the violations. First and foremost, let me say fantastic job by Jill and Yigal. You knocked it out of the park and you made my closer role a lot simpler. Plenty of run support, unlike some of the New York teams these days, but thank you. I just got to throw some strikes here and do my best. I'll keep it lighthearted. We'll get to the facts, and definitely I'll be here to answer the questions as well. We'll start off with elevators. DOB Now Safety for elevator compliance filings. It launched on September 17th of 2018. So we've been going for almost 3 years now, and everything has gone swimmingly. Of course, with any launch, there are bumps in the road, but we are making enhancements and adjustments and pressing forward each day. The first step, whether it's boilers, whether it's elevators, whether it's facades, as we've been talking about, you must register for e-filing. Depending on your role, whether you're the homeowner, whether you're a licensed professional, whether you're a design professional, whether you're a boiler inspector, etc. The first step is you must register for e-filing. If you're already registered in e-filing, then you will use your existing e-filing username and password to access DOB Now. Again, as they mentioned, all these websites and addresses will appear in the presentation, so you don't have to scramble to keep note of this. But for this one, it's www.nyc.gov/DOB e-filing. You'll see that prefix on many of these. So this is the public portal and the DOB Now homepage. This is just a snippet of it. But as was mentioned earlier, we do provide a ton of FAQs and helpful links that you will find on this page when you pull up www.nyc.gov/DOB Now. This is the bottom left-hand snippet. However, if you scroll across the top of the page, there's a cornucopia of information at your fingertips. And just like facades, boilers, and elevators, FAQs get updated frequently with the new changes, with the new rollouts, with the enhancements, etc. On this screen, you can access the same functions using this public portal. Anything that's in DOB Now, you can search, whether it's by whatever means you feel is simplest for you. You can search by address, job number, bin, borough, block, and lot, device search. There's also a licensee search, and fairly new is this violation search. You can search for violations on properties for boilers and elevators, and it'll also give you a history and an accounting for how much is owed as well. This right-hand piece, this is where you would log in to go into DOB Now. Also, there is need more help, contact us. This is how we prefer the communication. This is tracked, this is streamlined. We have subject matter experts that are handling these requests. So if you need to contact us, that is the help ticket. Also, you can just, if you want to go straight to the help ticket, it's the same thing, just add help at the end of DOB Now. So it would be the www.nyc.gov, DOB Now help, and you'll go right to the help ticket. Once you log on, depending on your role in DOB Now, I just wanted for you to have a view of what the dashboard may look like. So from this piece, it's pretty user-friendly. You can go in there and you can look to see what's in pre-filing. You can go in and pay for the reports. You can choose to start an initial report, etc. This is just so that you have an idea of what it looks like for the users. For elevators, elevators receive several inspections, but there are two that are mandated, and we want to kind of try to separate it. So we will phrase one as a periodic inspection, and then the other one as a category test. So the periodic inspection piece, these are often referred to as visual and routine, and right now they're currently performed they are mandated to be performed by the department. So we have two vendors that perform many of them. About, let's say, 65,000 inspections are done by our vendors that do the work on our behalf. And then the other, let's say 13,000 or so, are supplemented by our in-house inspectors. So they play a key role, and this is not their only function, but they actually are stepping up with the large universe of elevator devices, 78,000 that need a periodic inspection, to ensure that these devices are looked at annually. So current practice, these are done by DOB. I'll get through some of the slides and changes. Moving forward, they're going to be done by the elevator agencies. So category tests are performed and witnessed by approved independent third-party agencies licensed by the department. So the category test, not only is there an inspector, a performing agency inspector there, but they also have a witnessing agency inspector that's there, which must be unaffiliated. So it can't be elevator company ABC performing the test and elevator company A, B, and C witnessing the test. We want them to be unaffiliated. This way, they're keeping an eye and kind of minding the shop. They have nothing to do with one another. So they want to make sure if there's a defect listed, that the defect does get listed. If there are no defects, we don't want any false reporting of a defect, etc. And lastly, the building owners are responsible for hiring an approved elevator inspection agency. Also for elevators, building owners are required to have a current maintenance contract with an approved elevator agency, and they must be able to perform the elevator repair work, maintenance, and the replacement. As you know, in DOB, we use a lot of acronyms. When you hear the phrase MCP, it's a maintenance control program. It must adhere to the protocols specified by the elevator manufacturer. Similar to how everyone drives a different car for the most part, these devices have different protocols as well. So you want to make sure that that MCP is available, and also the maintenance log, similar to how you're going to go and get your car oil changed every, depending X amount of miles, depending on the type of oil, etc. We also want that log to be kept, so that if the MCP requires, a certain amount of maintenance on whether it's ropes or whatever, we want to make sure that it's performed at the correct intervals. Now, we just want to go into the elevator device types, right? Everyone commonly uses a passenger elevator, but there are more than one type of elevator. We have passenger elevators, freight elevators, sidewalk elevators, escalators, several types of accessibility lifts, dumbwaiters, material lifts, man lifts, and moving walk. One other note too, accessibility lifts and dumbwaiters that are located in private residence, 1 to 2 family dwellings. They're not required to file the report, but they are required to do the inspection and to maintain a log. And they must keep that on record. If we ever go there, you need to provide us that on demand. Just to go into some of the lingo, elevator sign off, right? You can't just put it in an elevator and decide that, oh, it's good, I'm going to start running the elevator because it's completed, the work is completed. When we talk about the lingo for elevators, we refer to it as a final certificate, a certificate issued by the department authorizing the operation of an elevator following a satisfactory acceptance test. Now, reporting on new installations is required the calendar year following a DOB test result of final issued. So let's say in January of 2021, the work was completed, you request an inspection, DOB goes out there, and we approve the device to be put into operation. You don't have to file in 2021, but you must file in 2022. This doesn't mean you can't file in 2021. You may absolutely decide that, hey, September, October, I just want to have a look at it and file the report anyway, even though I'm not mandated to the first year. That's absolutely allowable. So going into the reporting requirements and the upcoming changes. The reason for the change is because of, for many aspects. One, we want a more timely reporting. And for two, we've kind of adapted into this new electronic system where it's no longer just, it was kind of archaic in the past where we'd literally just accept stacks and stacks and stacks of paper filings annually. For elevators, we would literally get about 130,000 paper reports to have to keep track of, data enter, store, etc. Now that it's all online, it makes it much simpler, and we are getting these filings. We get approximately 10,000 elevator filings per month. The initial filings are often referred to as the ELV3. Current practice, they must be submitted within 60 days of the date of inspection. So if you got the inspection done in January, you have approximately 2 months to give us those results. Moving forward, ideally effective 2022. We're expecting everything to go through smoothly. That's going to now be reduced to 21 days, right? So you're going down from 60 days to 21 days. However, these are all digital submissions for elevators. Currently, there are 5 parties that are associated with the filing. There's that must go in and at least perform one function, whether it's just an attestation piece. We have the performing agency director or co-director, performing inspector, witnessing director, co-director, and the witnessing inspector, plus the owner. There are talks of potentially reducing that so that it's just the performing and witnessing directors and the owner to make this transition a little more seamless and to be able to accommodate that reduced reporting period. As far as the subsequent filing, so in elevators, we do the elevators have a lot of moving parts and they're making many trips a day. So a lot of the initial reports do get reported with defects. Actually, close to 70% of the initial filings will have some sort of defect. It could be minor housekeeping items, might be something as simple as dirty pit. However, if the report contains a defect, you must submit this affirmation of correction stating that the repairs were made and file the report. In today's world, you have 120 days to correct those defects and 60 days to file. So a total of 180 days to get that information over to us. Moving forward in 2022, that's going to be reduced to 90 days to repair those defects and 14 days to file. However, we understand that there may be extreme circumstances where there's a part that's backorder, etc. You will be able to file up to 2 separate 45-day extensions. They will be reviewed by the technical team, and if they are legitimate, then you have some more time on your side. Also, the Category 1, the initial reports, they must be at least 6 months apart. So the purpose of this is to kind of stagger those inspections. We don't want it, we don't want any shenanigans where somebody says, oh, it's December 31st and I want to give you my Cat 1, and then Jan 1, I'll give you another one. No, we don't want, within a couple of days or a couple of weeks or even a couple of months. We'd like to keep those staggered. These devices are moving constantly, and we would prefer to have them on a staggered basis, similar to how, you would go out there and you want to take care of your teeth. You don't want to go to the dentist once a year. Go there often and prevent with more preventative maintenance to keep these devices safe and running and to keep the passengers safe. As far as periodic inspections, again, I'll go into today's world and also into tomorrow's world. In today's world, we have the vendors that go out there and do these inspections on our behalf, and they will input those results to us. They'll upload those results, and we'll in turn report those onto, you can find those on BizWeb, or if our inspectors go out, alternatively, they will go out and perform the inspections, and they will be inspection ready. Moving forward next year, similar to how the Cat 1 tests are reported, these periodic inspections will have to be done by the elevator agencies, and they will have to report those results to us in DOB Now. The initial filings will have to be submitted within 14 days of the date of the inspection. So pretty simple. You did your inspection on Jan 1, by Jan 14 or Jan 15, you should get that report to us. Subsequent filings for these periodic inspections, the affirmations of correction, the AOC, must be submitted within 104 days in total. So 90 days to correct and 14 days to file. Unlike the testing, this is more of a visual report. You don't have extensions on this piece. You have extensions on the category test, but not on the periodic inspections. However, this is changing. There are many benefits to this. For example, right now, these are uncoordinated inspections for the most part. The inspectors show up unannounced. They may be similar. They may not have that gap in time between a Cat 1 and a Cat 1 test and a periodic inspection. But now we don't have to worry about no access. Is another huge benefit to this. So, and as a building owner, you can decide to schedule it as needed, or your maintenance company, you can work with them as well. As far as the gap, I mentioned earlier that there's a gap between the category test, must be 6 months apart. There is also a gap between the periodic inspection and the category test. they must be at least 90 days apart. So moving forward, there's just your schedule and your calendar is going to have to be a little bit tighter. However, there's plenty of time throughout the year to get this done. As far as Cat 5 tests, right? Cat 5 is 5 years. The definition seems simple, although in the past there was a little bit of leniency in the interpretation. Now there is not. It is being followed to the letter of the law. They shall be performed within 5 years from the month of issuance of a final certificate for a new elevator. So we'll pause right there. Brand new elevator just got signed off in Jan of 2021. You have until the end of the month in Jan of 2026 to perform that inspection, and then you submit that result to us. This does not mean that you wait until Feb, March, April, May, June of 2026, because in that instance, you technically missed your reporting cycle, and you will be subject to the weightier violation for failure to file your Cat 5 report, which is $5,000 for most buildings. So please remember, it's not a 5-year and 1-month test. It's a 5-year test, and it should be done at 5 years. You may do it earlier, but we also don't want you to be doing these five-year tests every year, because they're kind of labeled as somewhat of a destructive testing, because they're literally putting wheelbarrows full of weights onto the machine at max capacity and slamming it through to make sure that all the safeties and governors, et cetera, work as they're meant to be. So it's very important to get it done. It's very important to do it within the range, the recommended range. As far as civil penalties go for these violations, you'll notice that 1 or 2 residential units in a private residence, not as weighty, but however, commercial mixed use, so more than 2 residential units, it is $3,000 for failure to file your Cat 1. It is $5,000 for failure to file your Cat 5. As far as the affirmation of correction, similar violations there for a private residence, 1 to 2 family, it's $1,000. $3,000. So as I mentioned before, about 70% of these reports come with defects. If you don't correct those defects and file with us, you may not get hit the first time because you reported initially, but if you don't do the right thing and make the adjustments and the fixes and let us know that they've been corrected, you will get hit on the back end. So we do see a significant volume of failure to file the AOC, and that's a $3,000 penalty. As far as Cat 5s are concerned, you cannot even file a Cat 5 with defects. Everything must be satisfactory when it comes to getting your Cat 5 test done. Shifting over to boilers. Quickly, before I do shift over to boilers, just to give you an idea, as I mentioned, we have approximately 86,000 elevators out there. And out of those 86,000 elevators, about 70,000 are passenger elevators. And making many trips a day across New York City, I would say probably a good ballpark guess is about 35 million rides per day. So these devices are being used frequently, and they are actually very safe, the safest mode of transportation, not only in New York City, but globally as well. Boiler safety compliance filings, that launched on August 14th of 2017. Again, similarly, it used to be an old paper process, very difficult to keep track of 100,000 filings, and now we get them digitally, which makes our lives much easier, not only for the process, the current process, but also to recall. Everything is at your fingertips now, where you could literally get a copy of the report or PDF and find it, at any point in time, and those records remain forever. So it definitely helps in many aspects. As far as the boiler universe, we have about 116,000 boilers that are under our jurisdiction, mostly low pressure boilers. Probably, let's say 114,000 low pressure and 2,000 high pressure. The high pressure boilers you'll mostly find in the hospitals or let's say school campuses, laundromats, things like that. The boiler compliance filings dashboard is very similar to elevators. You can go in here and pretty much it's very user friendly. Go in there to submit your reports, make payments, etc. There's also for the boilers, there's a piece where if if let's say the insurance company inspector goes out and finds a boiler that is unregistered, you can also report your unregistered boiler with us using DOB Now as well. So who can submit these inspections to us, right? The homeowner, one thing, the homeowner is responsible. However, the homeowner cannot submit the report. They have to hire someone to perform the inspection and also to submit the report. Annual inspections for boilers are performed by authorized insurance agency inspectors, master plumbers, oil burner installers, and high pressure boiler operators / stationary engineers. And this is pretty much the order by volume as well. It's pretty top heavy. We get the bulk of these reports from the insurance agency inspectors. As far as low pressure boiler, which boilers need to be inspected? Low pressure boilers in residential buildings with 6 or more dwellings. Low pressure boilers in mixed use or commercial buildings. Low pressure boilers in residential buildings classified as SRO or single room occupancy dwellings. H-stamp domestic hot water heaters with more than 350,000 BTUs in residential, mixed use, and commercial buildings. The difference between high pressure boilers and low pressure boilers, the high pressure boilers must have 2 inspections. They must have an internal inspection and an external inspection. They must be conducted within the same cycle year and shall be performed approximately 6 months apart. So let's say in July, you get your you want to just do the external, and you have to space that out a little bit, make sure that you have enough time to do that internal. Maybe you want to do that in the wintertime when the boiler is fully operational. So you just want to make sure that you give yourself some time. The threshold right now is set at 90 days. So you can't do it in fewer than 90 days, but at day 91, we will accept the report. But bear in mind that you want to do that in the same year. You can't say that, oh, I did my external in July, and then I didn't do my internal until the following year. No, it must happen between Jan 1 and 12/31 of the same year, both inspection types. Unlike the low pressure boilers, the high pressure boiler inspections can only be performed by an authorized insurance company inspector. Similar cycle, it's Jan 1 through December 31 of each calendar year. So for example, Jan 1 of this year through December 31 of this year would be considered the 2021 cycle. The initial filings in current day, they must be submitted within 45 days of the date of inspection. Moving forward, that 45-day window is going to be reduced to 14 days. Again, everything is electronic. This DOB Now system can be done basically from everywhere, even for the portion of the owner. They could be sitting having drinks in the Caribbean and go in and accept their filing. Anywhere you have access to a computer, you can go in and do what you got to do. 24 hours, 7 days a week. So subsequent filings, the affirmation of correction for boilers must be submitted within 180 days of the initial inspection date, similar to elevators. But moving forward, similar to elevators, that will be reduced to 90 days to correct those defects and 14 days to file. And the annual inspections, just like the category test for elevators, they must be at least 6 months apart. Just like elevators, you have to receive DOB approval before you could put this device. And interestingly enough, we do have a higher rate of failure of first test inspections on boilers versus elevators. New boiler installations and boilers that have undergone replacement must be inspected by the department in order to receive approval for their use and operation. Reporting on new installations is required the calendar year following the first test passed inspection. So same thing, the boiler was signed off in 2021. You don't have to file in 2021. You may, but the following year, if you do not file, you will receive a failure to file violation. As far as boilers go, it's $1,000 per year, per cycle year, per device. Same thing for initial, same thing for subsequent reports. The high pressure is slightly different. As we mentioned earlier, there are 2 inspection types, an internal and an external. If you fail to do both of those, you will get $1,000 for failure to file the internal and $1,000 for failure to file the external. So it's very important that you do both of them. What else did I want to mention? Oh, as far as DOB Now help, just backtracking a little bit, and as far as DOB Now overall, please make sure, as I mentioned, these fines are levied against the owner. It is very important through all of these launches that I've sat through, and I've sat and gone through at least 4 of them at this point. We get some pushback as far as requiring the owner to register an e-filing, to have their contact information. I've heard all the excuses in the world is they're not computer savvy, or the ownership is always changing, or they manage too many buildings. We need that ownership information, and it's important as an owner to want that, right? If you own a building, you want to make sure that you paid, your boiler inspector or elevator company to file the report. And this gives you an email each time throughout the steps of the processes to know that you filed, so that now you don't have to worry about that violation because you know you have it, and you also have proof of filing as well. So that's very important to have the right names. And also it's very important as the applicant or the company, please give us legitimate owners. I've had some very funny ones, just, I'm not going to mention the exact ones, but let's say you're Super Mario's Plumbing. We don't want every owner to be Luigi or Yoshi or a made-up name, right? I've actually, a true name, we used to have one person that was giving us every owner was Front Desk. It's very easy to find because we can run these reports, right? We know that there aren't, every owner is Front Desk. So please bear in mind that everything is digital, everything is trackable, and we want the right owners, and we want to make sure that everybody's safe, and that we want to make sure that, the burden falls on the owners. So please protect the owners by reaching out to them and getting the correct owners. What else did I want to make sure that I include in this presentation? Oh, the help tickets. When you do submit us help tickets, please make sure that you keep it as streamlined as possible. Please don't tell us about, don't mix up boilers and elevators. Don't give us 22 properties with 50 different devices. Keep it simple. So select the correct module. If it's for safety boilers, select safety boilers. If it's for safety elevators, select safety elevators. This way it'll be more streamlined. You won't get bounced around. The response will be more timely. Redundant tickets do not help us. I understand sometimes that folks want to just get their answers, but submitting 12 tickets for the same exact items will only lead to more delay. So please be mindful of that. Be patient. We have a lot of devices out there. As I mentioned, close to 200,000 filings if I combine boilers and elevators together. We don't have a tremendous staff to oversee all of this, but they are working diligently. And we're doing our best to help out. And that's it. I guess I'd like to conclude with one interesting tidbit that was exciting to me to read and hear. And as far as to assuage any fears out there that elevators seem to get in the limelight anytime there's a minor incident or a major incident, which of course we look to avoid at all costs whatsoever. It seems that the reporting gets out of control. However, they are very safe, safest mode of transportation across not only New York City, but across the world. And the fun fact that I'd like to leave you with is that if you took all the elevators put together worldwide, they actually would carry the equivalent of the Earth's population every 3 days. And that's all I got. And thank you for your time.